paint better be blue. That's all I'm going to say. It better be blue. Oh, it's blue.
Overtime!
Can you believe it? It's finally happening. I've been working on restoring this original Ms. Pac-Man cabinet for 2 years. I've been working on this thing for 2 years and I'm finally painting it. You know, I've been through quite an ordeal with this cabinet. When I got it, it was painted black. You know, the original stenciled artwork on the cabinet had been painted over in black. And my plan was, that I could delicately strip all that black paint off and recover the original stenciled side art. And that didn't work. The original stenciled side art was just way too far gone. It was damaged before the black paint went onto it, and no way I could recover it. So sanded it all off, and that wasn't the end of the situation. So it took well over a year for the reproduction stencils that I ordered from This Old Game to show up. I finally got them. And all the paint colors that everyone had used for years that were established as the correct paint colors for Ms. Pac-Man, well, guess what? All the paint manufacturers changed their paint codes, they changed their paint formulas, and the old codes don't work anymore, so I was completely out of luck there. And you know, getting the right paints, the right paint colors to match the original colors on Ms. Pac-Man, again, quite the ordeal. So I live in Virginia, and it turns out, and I didn't know this, in Virginia, you cannot buy custom tinted, custom colored oil-based paint. And oil-based paint is really what you want to be spraying with stencils, oil-based paint. In Virginia, you can buy custom tinted latex paint. You can buy pre-mixed oil-based paints, but you cannot buy custom tinted, custom colored oil-based paint. It's been illegal for years, something with the environment, I have no idea. So I was out of luck there. And you know, I decided, hey, it's October now, it's getting colder outside, and you really don't want to be, you know, spraying paint or doing any kind of painting when it's you know, below 50 degrees, so I need to take advantage of the remaining, you know, couple of weeks of good weather that we have, and I'm just going for it. So that's what we're doing. So this is the setup that I'm going with. A couple different changes, you know. Last year I had put together an HVLP setup that I bought with a large air compressor and all this stuff from Harbor Freight, and I practiced by touching up my joust cabinet with a joust restoration with that setup, and that worked fine, but that was a lot of work to set up and tear down and clean and whatever, and it was, you know, to get everything, all the pressure calibrated and whatever, and filters and blah, 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 blah. And, you know, that was another thing that wasn't exactly, you know, getting me thrilled about doing this. So I actually got a new HVLP sprayer. This is technically, I think they call this an airless sprayer. It is HVLP. This is the box from Amazon that it came in. It doesn't even have a brand. I think this is just some, you know, generic Chinese thing that's sold by lots of different, you know, resellers on Amazon. Arcade Eric, Overtime Arcade channel member Arcade Eric, put me onto this. He had been using it to do the stencils on his Williams Stargate, and he said it had been working for him. It's cheap, so I got one. I think it was even on a, you know, Amazon Prime Day or whatever deal. And you know, so this works pretty good. It's cheaper. It's easier to clean. You know, I can throw the whole thing away. I'm probably only going to use this for one project, and for the next project, I'll buy a new one. But that's what we're going to be using instead of the big elaborate, you know, air compressor based system. This is much easier to set up and tear down and clean. There's still some work to do. Cleaning is still the the biggest part of this whole process. But yeah, this is the HVLP sprayer that we're going with. And these are also the paint colors that I'm going with. So they're not exactly perfect, but I think they're pretty close. These are all pre-mixed paints, legal to buy in Virginia, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So they're all from Rust-Oleum. You know, for the base coat, the blue coat, kind of the baby blue, whatever you want to call it, I went with Rust-Oleum K7725 Safety Blue. I got a whole gallon of this because this needs to cover the entire cabinet. And I did 2 coats, so I used probably a little bit, you know, right around half a gallon to do that, maybe. I don't know. But that looks you know, really good, and you saw me paint that on before. I'm actually quite happy with that. And I've got the stencils on the cabinet now. So, you know, this has to be painted on 3 sides, the front and both sides of the cabinet. And there are 3 colors of stencils, right? So typically what you're gonna do is, you know, spray on a primer, and then you've got your base coat, and the base coat for Ms. Pac-Man is blue. And then there are 3 layers of stencils. There's a yellow layer, a pink layer, and a black layer. And that's sort of those 4 colors, the blue and then the 3 stencil colors are what produce the side art. So right now I've got the first set of stencils. So there's 9 stencils in total, 3 colors for 3 sides each. So, you know, we're looking at the right side, color 1 yellow right here. And so I've got, you know, the first set of yellow stencils applied to the cabinet. And it kind of goes on just like side art. There's a backing paper, and then there's a mask layer that you have to remove. And that's really what exposes the stencil pieces, because the stencil's here, but this is directly onto the cabinet right here in the openings. There's a bunch of different details, especially down here. Some of these get caught up on the backing paper or on the mask, and you can tear it very easily. I think I tore it right here and had to peel it off the mask and put it back on. I think I did a pretty good job, but you know, it's not going to be perfect, but you know, it wasn't perfect coming out of the factory, so I think that's going to be okay. In this cabinet, the way I've restored it, you know, it was a little bit rough, so it's going to be just fine here. A couple other things to point out with the stencil. There are, in a couple of different spots, and you can't quite see it because they're covered, there are these registration marks. They're like these triangle cutouts with asterisks. That's what this is referring to right here. And these need to stay, you know, they come from the first layer, the first stencil, and they need to stay on the cabinet throughout the entire process. And they're really like, it's like a triangle with an asterisk in there just to make it easy to see. You need to leave those triangles on the cabinet when you peel off the stencil and before you put the next one on, because when you put the next one on, you are going to, you know, line up that triangle with a hole in the stencil above, and that keeps everything aligned. They call it registration, right? So there's 5 on the front, there's five on each side and 4 on the front, and that'll keep all of the stencils aligned. And it also says, do not remove from cabinet, so we'll leave those on, and then mask over when painting. So these have all been masked over, so I won't, you know, paint over the registration marks. I'll be able to see where they are. Another thing that I did, and I've been taking advice from everyone, I already mentioned Arcade Eric, Liam from Retrobotics did this for his joust. And also another joust I got stenciled was Lakeside Arcade has a blog and a YouTube channel. I'll link to both of those in the channel description or the video description down below. A lot of folks talked about doing what's called a seal coat. So after you paint a layer, and in this case I've only painted, well, I did the primer, and then I painted the base coat of blue on, and then you put your first layer of stencils on. After you apply each layer of stencil, before you paint it, you actually will paint over the stencil again with the color that was just on from before. And the whole idea behind that is so that if there's any kind of dripping or leaking, it kind of gets into the seam here, and that dries and really seals the stencil to the cabinet. So when I come over this with yellow, none of the yellow can get behind the stencil and run or whatever, so they'll give you really, really sharp marks. Sometimes you don't really want that on Williams cabinets. They, you know, weren't necessarily as sharp with their stencils, but we're going to make this Ms. Pac-Man look as good as possible. So I did this seal coat, and basically you take a little bit of the leftover paint from the previous application. You're going to thin it down, you know, quite a bit more with mineral spirits until it's really just kind of like a light wash. And then you take a foam brush and just go over it, and you can kind of see the color changing. Like this is the stencil, and the stencil has its own little blue tint to it. And you can sort of see where that wash has gone all over. So that's all sealed on, and even, you know, it's covered over in the painter's tape masking right here. So I did that seal coat, and the cabinet is completely ready for me to spray the yellow layer. I've got everything masked off that I want to mask off. You know, you don't have to do go too crazy, because most things where overspray might land, you're actually going to get sprayed over anyway. So this is the white primer. All this interior is going to get painted black at the end. So it's fine if it gets a bunch of overspray onto it, no big deal. You know, I've got some cardboard here just to prevent a lot of paint from going into the interior of the cabinet, just to you know, keep it nice and tidy. Similarly, I've got another piece of cardboard up here for the marquee box. I've got the top of the cabinet masked off with newspaper, because this got painted blue and I don't want a bunch of yellow going onto the cabinet, or the pink or the black or whatever. But the back is pretty much open. I don't really care if there's overspray gets into there. So the cabinet's ready to go. So coming back over here, like I said, I went with this Rust-Oleum Safety Blue as my base layer. For the primer, I actually started with this you know, rattle can primer. I used a couple different cans of this and did one coat of primer with that. I wasn't super thrilled with that. I didn't like the coverage. It wasn't all that great. So I sanded it down a little bit and then sprayed on a coat of this white primer that came in the can. I figured that would be good practice, you know, using this new HVLP sprayer for the first time. And you know, that worked really well. And again, I sanded a little bit. You know, one of the issues that I have been having is, you know, I've been tending to get runs with this spray gun. So I don't know if I need to stand back a little bit or do lighter coats or whatever. I've been thinning it, you know, according to the directions. It actually uses this sort of funny little cup here. You dip it into the paint and you count, you know, you time how long it takes for it to drain out to determine, you know, the viscosity or whatever. So I've been getting runs. I got runs with the primer, and that's why I sanded it after both layers. And I got runs with the blue, and I did paint, like I said, I sprayed 2 coats of the blue on. I got some bad runs the first time. Those sanded off, and I did pretty good with the second coat. The only really noticeable runs are actually on the top of the cabinet, and I'm not too worried about that because most people won't see it. So yeah, we're ready to do the yellow next. And if I'm honest, this yellow is the least perfect match out of all the colors. So this is gloss Sunburst yellow. There was another yellow that was a little bit more accurate. I think it might have been safety yellow, but it only came in gallons. And I've sunk enough money into this project. You know, I'm kind of upside down underwater on this Ms. Pac-Man, and I wasn't about to drop, you know, when I only need, you know, this quart will be more than enough. I probably could have gotten away with a pint, but these aren't sold in pints. I certainly wasn't going to buy a whole gallon of this yellow paint unless I was doing a whole bunch of Ms. Pac cabinets. And trust me, I have no intention to paint another Ms. Pac-Man ever again. So this is the yellow that we're going to use. I would say it's about a 90% match, maybe 95, which is good enough. So that's what we're going to be doing right now. And then once that stencil is complete, you know, we'll paint it. We'll peel off the stencil. We'll let it dry for a few days. We'll apply the new stencil on, the next stencil on, which is the second stencil, the pink layer. We'll do the sort of seal coat with a little bit of the leftover yellow paint, and then we'll paint the pink on. And for the pink, the best match I could find is actually only available in a rattle can. So this Rust-Oleum spray paint color is called Poppy Pink. And this was the closest match, and it actually is a pretty good match for the Ms. Pac-Man pink. What I did was I brought my Ms. Pac-Man control panel with the control panel overlay. You know, I did a bunch of research online, and to confirm, I brought the control panel overlay into the store and matched everything up really good. So I think this will be good. I got a whole case of I think it came with 6 cans, which hopefully should be enough. There's a lot more yellow to paint than there is pink. And then the final layer will be satin black. And this is a can that I used maybe a week or so ago to paint the back of the new back door that I cut for the J-Rock Cubert that I just finished restoring. And so I got plenty of black left in here, and this will be good for, there's a lot of black sort of outlines and details that go on the black layer. So yeah, so here's what I need to do. Oh, and by the way, you know, because I'm working with oil-based paint, you need to use mineral spirits for a bunch of different stuff. Mineral spirits are what you use to thin the paint, because the paint comes, you know, in the can, designed really, you know, for rolling or brushing. For spraying, you need to thin it a little bit. And oil-based paint should be thinned with mineral spirits. You also use mineral spirits to clean up. You run a bunch of mineral spirits through the sprayer. to clean out the internals before you take it apart, disassemble it and clean it even more thoroughly. So just with the 4 applications so far, the 2 layers of primer and the 2 layers of blue paint, I've already used basically this whole gallon of mineral spirits. So good thing I bought another can of it over here. So you will need quite a lot of mineral spirits, especially if you're sort of wasteful with it like I am. Again, for cleanup, for thinning, for lots of different stuff. So make sure you buy plenty of mineral spirits. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to wheel the cabinet out into the yard because I'm doing this outside because I don't have a painting booth. I'm going to thin my my yellow paint. We'll mix it up with the mineral spirits. We'll get it perfectly thinned, and then we'll head outside and spray this stencil. All right, I got my mask on, my paint mixed, and it's time to shoot some yellow. It's coming out a little chunky. I don't know. We'll have to see what it looks like. I'm gonna do the other sides and do another light coat. So wish me luck. Okay, I finished painting the yellow stencil, and I think it's time to peel this off. Now, there's a lot of different opinions on how long you should wait before peeling off a stencil layer. It depends on a ton of stuff, the type of paint that you're using and humidity and whatever. You want it dry enough where it's not just going to run once you pull the stencils off. You also don't want it so dry that it's going to peel off the paint that's connected on top of the stencil and underneath it. And I've actually, some people say only wait 15 minutes. Some people say 12 hours. I was trying to do it at 12 hours, but life got in the way, and it's been 24. So we're going to start peeling, and hopefully everything goes okay. If we come up and take a closer look at what we accomplished, it's not perfect. And this side is definitely the worst of the 3 sides. This side was facing the sun, and it's got quite a few, I guess, gnats or bugs ended up landing on the stencil and embedding themselves in there. And this looks so much yellower on camera than it does in person. It's a little bit more orange in person. So yeah, and we have some kind of, I don't know if it'll show up, I guess it will, some kind of runs in here, but the pink will cover up a lot of this. It's sort of worst at the bottom down there. And I might, yeah, and like I said, this is the worst part of it on the cabinet. Went a little bit heavy. And in there too. I might go over this with a little, sanding and touch it up, especially, look at that. That's really heavy right there. I might really lightly sand that and touch it up before putting the next coat on, but I'm not entirely sure. So to peel this, we need to first peel off the masking that I added to cover the registration marks. Again, these are little triangles with asterisks on them that will remain on the cabinet throughout the process. They're coming off of the first layer of stencil, and they're going to stay here, and you'll sort of see if the light will catch it right. There's a little triangle shape there. We'll peel off the stencil, and that will remain, and that'll be our registration mark for applying the other stencils and getting them aligned. It's hard to do this with one hand. Okay, and you can see the paint is not perfectly cured just yet because it's only been 24 hours. And this is oil paint, which takes longer to cure. Let me peel the rest of these registration maskings off, and then we'll attack the whole stencil in just a second. Okay, I've got all the registration mark maskings off, and we can start to carefully peel this stencil off. And I'm trying to avoid, ripping any of the base coat blue off. And I have a X-Acto knife handy, because there's a lot of little itty bits and pieces that I need to sort of pull out. You can see some of the blue is coming off, which I don't love. I mean, the cabinet looks fine, so, and here's our first bit of exposed. Here we go. Those lines look pretty good. And let me cut it right here, actually. Another reason that, you know, it can be good to wait a little while before pulling the stencils off is if this paint is still wet and the stencil flops down, you don't want any of that paint to be transferred. And to get nice straight lines as much as possible, you want to pull the stencil off, you know, against the sort of line. You know, if you pull it this way, you risk really peeling that paint, but again, it's not fully cured. You risk peeling that off. So we're going to make this turn. Cabinet's still on wheels, which doesn't help with stability and getting leverage. You know, here's some of the texture from the imperfect job I did painting the blue. I'm going to cut it here as well too. And we'll keep going here. This is both satisfying and a bit nerve-wracking at the same time. Because, you know, the paint is sort of dry to the touch. It's not tacky anymore, but, you know, I could rip it off with my fingernail if I needed to. And I would rather not do that. See, the stencil will rip relatively easily, which helps me in certain circumstances, but can hinder me in others. So we'll come over here, and hopefully the triangle for the registration mark, here we go, will remain on the cabinet, and there it is. So that's good. I'll keep coming down here. Let that stencil rip in a helpful way. There we go. Okay. You kind of get the general idea of what's going on here, right? So back you up a little bit. And through the magic of television, I've actually already done the other side of the cabinet. So let's turn this around here and take a look at what we got going on. So I think pretty good. You know, like I said, this side is definitely better than the other. Nice clean lines, fewer runs if any. There's a little bit sort of right here. All the registration marks made it. You know, there's a couple sort of divots right there, no big deal. You know, far fewer bugs. But one issue though is we took some of the blue paint off, mostly at the bottom, and what's interesting is sort of the pattern down here. I don't know what was going on, if, you know, the paint didn't fully adhere, and even this wants to peel off, which I don't love. So I don't know why this didn't adhere all that well, but, you know, this is a nice straight line at least. So what I can do, you know, I'll finish painting the whole cabinet, and then I'll come back and do, you know, touch-ups. You'll have to do some touch-ups here and there. Those sort of little lines, really thin lines right there, are from where I actually tore the stencil as I was taking the masking off. So yeah, I can probably, you know, scratch that off with my fingernail. We can touch it up if we need to. We'll do a little touch up right there, won't be too bad, and right there won't be too bad. I'll do all that by hand with like a foam brush or something, and that should be pretty okay. Another thing that I forgot to do, and I realized, I don't know if I mentioned this, there's a couple of spots on the cabinet that the stencil didn't quite cover up, and I forgot to mask this off. And this is not stencil. This is like what's left over. So there's a layer of yellow right here. I'll probably, again, once I'm done painting the whole cabinet, lightly sand this off and then touch up the blue. You know, there's some more down here too, and I tried to peel it off my fingernail, and I'm just kind of making a mess of it. So that's no big deal. We'll have some minor touch-ups to do. So yeah, let me go peel off the rest, and I already did the front of the cabinet too, which looks good. Again, you know, some extra down at the bottom, but we'll get all that squared away. So yeah, let me finish peeling off the stencil on this side of the cabinet, and then we'll come back and we'll put the pink stencil on, and we'll do the seal coat together, and then we'll be ready to move on and spray on some pink paint. Okay, I'm getting ready to apply the second layer of stencils. This is the pink layer, and yeah, like I said, I went back and you know, kind of sanded down the imperfections. This is the worst of the sides. You're gonna freak out. Look at all that. Look at how much blue paint got lifted off by the stencil. I'm not sure what the issue was, some adhesion, or the primer and the paint didn't get along, or maybe this primer was really thin because I did sand it down quite a bit down here. Like you can see some of the Bondos sticking through. But, you know, I'll be able to touch this up, no problem. There's similar issues on the other side, but this side was the one that had the most of the issues with the runs and the drips and all that. So I actually took some 700 grit sandpaper, this stuff right here that you can use wet or dry. I used it dry in this case, and kind of, you know, very gently sanded down those runs and those imperfections and whatever, especially down here in the bottom sort of rung of yellow, and you can sort of see how it looks lighter because it's been sanded down. I will eventually go back and touch this up, but I don't want to do that now because the pink and the black will cover up a bunch of it. So I'm not going to do any touch-ups until I'm done with all of the stencils. Maybe that's a mistake, I don't know. But after everything is sprayed on, I'll go back by hand, probably with a foam brush, and I'll touch up the blue and the yellow, and hopefully that's it. So I didn't show you with the first layer how to actually apply the stencils. It's very easy. It's, you know, very, very similar to side art. So I've got this side perfectly aligned. We have our 5, you can't see all of them, of these registration marks. These again are pieces of the first layer, the yellow layer of the stencils that get left behind. And there are these triangular cutouts on the you know, the subsequent layers of the stencil. And these are in areas that don't get any paint. And you can see that they're poking through, and it gives you an opportunity to line up all 5 of those triangles perfectly. It has this asterisk just to make it easier to find. So we're ready to go. So yeah, basically it just goes on like side art. I've got my clamps to hold it down, and we can start with the top here. I'll get the, where's my cutter? I can get the backing coming off. We got to be careful because there's also a mask layer, and I can see I got yellow paint in my fingernails. See, I don't know if you can see, but the stencil is really 3 layers of material. There's the backing paper, like this shiny paper that we're going to remove that has the grid pattern on it. The stencil is actually blue and semi-transparent. You can see that here. And then it has this masking layer on the top to sort of help with you know, applying the stencil and not damaging it. So we'll just take this off and be careful not to rip the stencil, because it will, you know, in these delicate little areas, it will want to stick to the backing paper. So we're just peeling this down. I probably did more than I should have all at once, but hey, this thing's not going to wind up perfect, and I have come to accept that. So we've got that there, and I'll grab my cutting tool from my vinyl application kit. That comes in handy when doing lots of stuff, not just vinyl. We'll cut this straight across, or relatively straight across, and I've got everything in my pockets. With my squeegee with the felt, we'll come up like this and start laying the stencil down, trying to avoid air bubbles. You don't really have to go crazy worrying about air bubbles. What you want to avoid is wrinkling the stencil. That's where you'll have problems, is if you wrinkle the stencil particularly bad. Air bubbles, not so much of a big deal, because the stencil will be eventually coming off. I mean, you don't want huge ones that are really disrupting you know, the stencil laying flat, but you don't have to go crazy with air bubbles here. So it's looking okay. Nothing too wrinkled, too crazy. We got some air right here. If this was actual side art, I'd be freaking out with that much air, but that's fine. All right. Just making sure we're not getting anything super wrinkled. Whoa. Some of these will be coming out when we lift the backing paper. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And we can come down here and do the bottom section. All right. Yeah, and I am definitely having to restrain my OCD, you know. I know I never do a perfect job on anything, but I often get frustrated when things aren't perfect. And I know I hide it, or at least I try to hide it. I'm sure I don't always do a great job hiding my frustration. Let's cut this so I don't do it all at once. Okay. And we're coming down. A lot of air right there too. Once we get the backing paper off, there's a lot more avenues for the air to come out. So don't worry just yet. All right. Coming down all the way. Whoop, that's not great. Kind of tore the stencil a tiny bit there on the triangle. So we'll make sure that that's lying down flat. Okay, now we'll come back up to the top and we will carefully peel the mask layer off. Okay. And this is kind of like peeling the pre-mask off of side art. There's a bit of an overhang at the top where it wants to pull the stencil away from the cabinet. And just take your time, don't go too fast. All right, just be careful around the borders. All right. Working our way down with this mask. And you'll see a million little air bubbles that you don't need to worry about. Mask likes to tear around the triangle area cutouts. Be careful you don't pull the template and the stencil off the cabinet. Like that. I just ripped the stencil, but I think that's a recoverable mistake. Get the rest of this mask off first. And I ripped it there too. Oh man. All right, I'm trying to carefully pull the pre-mask off of where the template tore, and it's actually kind of like perforated, which is a huge pain. I don't know if it was rolled too hard. It looks like it was sliced almost. So I'm trying to do this as delicately as possible to to avoid it ripping it further like that. Get it? Oh man. All right, working on my hands and knees. That's about as good as I can get it. You know, from the camera, you can't quite see it, but it's not perfect. But I'm telling myself, you know, it's mostly in the area that I was going to have to touch up anyway. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a couple of minutes, kind of go over the stencil, focusing on the boundaries and making sure that, you know, it's nice and flat on all of the seams. And then I'll put the stencils on the other two sides, the other side on the front kick plate. Not too worried about the bubbles as long as they're not in a seam, you know what I mean? And then I'll mix up, I'll thin out some leftover yellow paint, and I'll show you how I do a quick seal coat. Okay, I've got all three stencils for the pink layer applied to the cabinet. One thing I also did, I mentioned this, I went over and added painter's tape over the registration mark openings because I don't want to cover that up. And I also did put some masking over the parts where the stencil doesn't cover the cabinet and I got yellow on before. I'd rather only sand off one layer of that later and then cover it with blue rather than multiple layers. So I'm ready to apply what's called the seal coat, which we basically go over the yellow with some more yellow. This is, you know, leftover yellow paint. It's pretty significantly thinned with mineral spirits, you know, essentially a 1-to-1 ratio. And you can see the opening. So this is, you know, stencil covering blue. This part that looks green is stencil covering yellow. And the part that looks yellow is the exposed opening of the stencil. That will be covered with pink. By painting over with a thin mixture or a thin version of the yellow paint, we're letting, you know, we're basically sealing the seam here so that, you know, when we come over with the pink, you know, it's much more difficult for the pink to get under the stencil and run under the stencil, which we don't want. We want to lock that pink into just the opening of the stencil to get nice sharp lines. And with the seal coat, if there's anything that runs behind the stencil, it's going to be the yellow, and so it'll be yellow running into yellow, which is much less of an issue. And so you can see there's a bunch of openings here. Anywhere where I see yellow, I'm going to very sort of lightly coat this with my, it's almost like a wash, right? It's going to dry pretty quickly, and then we can paint over it. There are, however, on the front, the kick plate of the cabinet, some openings that go directly onto the blue, and I'm not going to put the yellow on them because that doesn't make sense as a seal coat. Maybe I should do it like with blue, but I'm actually not going to bother. And if there's an issue, we can sort of see what happens when you don't do this seal coat. So I've got just a cheap foam brush here. I'll dip it in here and get it sort of saturated. And I'm really going to squeeze this out because I don't want to apply much of this stuff at all because this is so thin, it will run. We don't want it to run. So this is almost just like a gentle wash that we're doing. So I'm squeezing this foam out pretty significantly, and I'm just barely coming over it like this, which is looking pretty good. Just a little bit in here to get into, and you can already see it wants to run. Get into the seams and lock the seams, basically, seal the seams, and then we can paint over that. That's running up there. We can paint over that with, yeah. You really don't need much of this because it's so thin, it wants to run. So, and you can see it's dripping. And so I might not even need to go back to the can or to the cup here. There's plenty of paint, or it's really a wash at this point that I can just grab and move where it needs to go. So let me go ahead and do that. I'll do the three sides. I'll let this dry overnight. And then we'll be ready to spray our pink paint. All right, it's the next day. The yellow seal coat is dry, and we're ready to paint our pink layer. Again, I'm using rattle cans here because this is the only way I was able to get this pink, this poppy pink, which is the closest match. It's gloss, which I'm not thrilled about, but I think it'll be all right. I've got an entire case of this, 6 cans. I hope that's going to be enough. I'm kind of expecting to use 1 on the front, 2 on each side, and then having a 6th one in reserve, and then for the next seal coat. So yeah, I'm going to do the front here first. So wish me luck. And the tip came right off. All right, this should be okay. All right. Okay, I don't want to get too heavy and introduce some drips, but that's looking pretty good. So I'm going to do the other sides, let it dry a little bit, and then in a couple hours, I'm not going to wait overnight, maybe just a couple hours before I take the stencils off. Okay, it's been a couple hours, and the spray paint dried pretty quickly. So let's go ahead and peel the stencil off. I want to keep saying template, which it's not that incorrect. I've got a utility knife, hobby knife here that helps kind of with picking at this stuff, but let's try to get an edge to work from. Of course, doing that makes it, oh, actually from the top that I want. Okay. There we go. And we'll peel this back gently. Yeah, pulling off blue again, which I don't like. Pulling against the seam or with the seam, with the line. All right. Make our turn. The paint really doesn't feel tacky or anything. That dried really nicely. Okay, this is going pretty good. See a little run in the blue that I didn't fix last week. All right, and you can see it's sort of triangle starting to emerge from the registration mark. We'll come down this side. It's not so bad. Okay, so far not terrible, and I can see the stencil lifted a little bit here. So I got a little drip of pink coming underneath here. That's not bad. All right, rather than subjecting you, I'll do this next bit, to having me sit here for several minutes and meticulously pick off all this stuff, because especially down where there's detail, it takes a little while. Come on, we'll do this chunk together. Don't want to tear into the head of the character. So kind of tear this here. All right. Rather than have you see me do this all meticulously, let me just show you what I've already done. And boy, oh boy, we've got some issues. So, oops, just dropped my hobby knife. So, up at the top, not so bad. You know, feeling pretty good. Back over here, pulling more blue up. And yeah, I don't know what happened, right? We're having adhesion issues between the blue and the primer. So not thrilled about that, but that could be touched up easily. Even this can sort of be touched up easily. A little bit there. This not too bad. You know, here, because we're not getting into the yellow. We got almost a little heart right there. That's cute. This I don't like at all. This even peeled into some of the pink, so there's going to have to be quite a bit of touch-up work here and down here as well. This isn't as bad as it looks. That's still really only, you know, blue down there at the bottom and over here and over here. But if we turn around and whoa, take a look at the other side of the cabinet, you know, basically similar stuff here at the top, little spots for touching up. Not that big of a deal, but down here again, we got into the yellow. I don't think any of the pink got removed there, but we'll have to touch up some of the yellow there and here. And it's essentially, you know, we painted over some blue that was having adhesion issues. So the blue starts coming up. And obviously, when that happens, it peels the yellow or pink paint that's on top of it. More yellow missing right there. So got a bit of touching up work to do. So let me go finish, you know, peeling off the stencil on the front of the cabinet. We'll give this a couple more days to cure. And then we will apply the stencils for the final layer, at least of the stenciling, the black layer, before I start attempting any of these touch-ups. All right, my descent into madness continues apace with these stencils. So I had this great idea, or so I thought. When I got home from work today, I was like, you know what? The weather's great out. I'm gonna throw these, the last layer of stencils, the black layer, on the cabinet. I'm gonna quickly spray it, knock it out. And I was thinking, you know, maybe part of the problem with the blue paint that's coming off is that the stencils were staying on the cabinet for too long. So I figured, get the stencil on really quick, spray it, peel it off maybe 15 minutes later to minimize the amount of time that the stencils are on the cabinet. Well, that didn't work because once I got these black stencils or the black layer on the cabinet, I realized something. I realized that there are hundreds of these teeny tiny little details that need to be individually popped out of the stencil because they don't peel off with the backing paper or with the mask. They're just barely die cut, and so they stick. And if we look really closely here, you can sort of see all these little pieces that need to be individually popped out with an X-Acto knife, which is what I've been doing on both sides. So I'm almost done. I've got the last couple of dozen right here that I need to do. So let me show you what this torture looks like. So this has taken me a couple of hours to get these stencils on, and it's pitch black out. So no, I won't be painting this evening. I might, there we go. Yeah, I'm hoping to paint in the morning. And, you know, ultimately, I don't think this is actually, the issue isn't being caused by the stencils being on the cabinet for too long. So if you watched the most recent episode of the Coin Jam podcast, watched it live, watched the, the replay, or I haven't gotten the audio version edited and uploaded yet. Sorry that the cabinet's shaking. It wasn't doing this a second ago. We had this guy, Ben Avery, who does a lot of high-end pinball restorations, and I was, so he stenciled tons of cabinets, arcade and pinball, and I was telling him the problems that I was having with the blue paint coming off, and he thinks, here's a big piece right here. Let's see if I get this. Let's peel this off. He thinks my issue is that when I sanded the primer, I sanded it with too fine a sandpaper, too high of a grit. So I think I was doing like 120 or 220 or something like that. And he's like, no, dude, that's way too high. You need to sand it with 40. It needs to be rough so that the paint can grab onto it. And here I was thinking that it needed to be smooth so that the finish would be smooth. But I mean, it makes sense, right? If it's too fine, there's nothing. If it's too smooth, there's nothing for the cabinet to grab onto. So, and at this point, I'm kind of stuck. The blue paint's on and the other layers are on. So, really to fix this, come on. There we go. Ugh. See, that's the problem that I have, is these little flecks of stencil want to fall. So if I want to really fix it, I'd have to sand it down to bare wood and start all over again. And we are far too past that point of no return. We crossed the Rubicon long ago, and we're just going for it. So yeah, let me get these last few dozen little flecks off. And then in the morning, we'll get outside once it warms up. It's supposed to be another nice day tomorrow. We'll get outside, we'll paint all the blue, or I'm sorry, all the black. I'll still want to take the stencils off relatively quickly after we do that. I've got to paint the inside of the cabinet. Here, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Be careful with this X-Acto knife that I'm holding. So we also got to paint the sort of inside of the, I don't know what you call this, the cowl or the hood of the cabinet. This all needs to be black too. So we'll paint all of that, and then I'll get started on the extensive, and this is the worst of the two sides. You can see all the light blue where the primer is poking through, shining through the stencil. We'll get started on all of this extensive touch-up work that I'm going to have to do. All right, we're ready to paint the black stencil. I've got everything masked off that I care to mask off. I've got all those little flecks removed from the stencil on the sides. I also, up at the top, there's supposed to be a feathering of the black. Like the black goes all around the inside, but then the top and the top of the inside lip is blue, and it's like a feathering transition. I've got some pieces of cardboard positioned there with double-sided tape to get that feathering effect. I learned that from an Arcade Jason video that Overtime Arcade channel member Wayne Sylvester pointed me to, where Jason was doing the stencils on a Burger Time, which is also a Bally Midway cabinet, at least that version was. And Wayne followed that for his Burger Time restoration. So I've got a bunch of different black paints, really the same black paint from Rust-Oleum, Satin Protective Enamel in black, in two different versions. This is the sort of, it says down there, any angle spray that I'm going to use sort of for the inside hood of the cabinet, because I also need to spray directly up. And then for the sides of the cabinet, the stencils, I've got this 5-in-1 tip, and I'm going to use, what do they call it? The vertical fan tip number 4 to sort of simulate, I guess, the HVLP effect. So yeah, wish me luck. Okay, I think that's it. I only ended up using those 2 cans. I bought 4 and only needed 2. And I think I got pretty good coverage. So I'm gonna let this dry only a little bit, maybe an hour or so. And then maybe I should wait longer actually. Maybe I'll wait until it's dry to the touch and then I'll peel it off very carefully and hope I don't lift up any more of that blue paint. Cross your fingers. Well, it's been about 4 hours and the black paint feels dry to the touch, so I'm gonna start peeling the stencils off. I've got my hobby knife, X-Acto blade ready in case I need to pick anything off. So here goes. Oh man, it feels tight. I don't want to lift any more blue paint off. You know, I was going back and I've started editing this episode of the clips that I've recorded. And this has been over the course of a couple of weeks that I've been, filming this episode. You've probably seen this cabinet in the background gradually getting, more and more paint on it. And I already noticed some things that I don't think I was doing quite right. In particular, when I was spraying the blue paint, with the HVLP sprayer, I wasn't going far enough past the cabinet with my passes. So I was coming like to here and then going down and then coming over. So extra paint was being applied on the edges, and I think that's what caused some of the runs. I should have gone clear past the edge and then down and then over. So that was a mistake. All right, let me get down to where the actual black paint is, and we'll take a look at what it looks like down there. All right, we're just starting to get into exposing the black. I already had some more blue paint come off the back, but it was, continuing a peel that was already started. But that looks pretty good so far. We're gonna have to pick out a bunch of the, shapes. Here's more appearing. All right. Okay, let's actually cut the stencil here just to make it a little bit easier to manage. All right, there we go. I'll cut all of this off actually. Okay, come on. You gotta be careful because once you peel the stencil, it still wants to pull back off or fall back onto the cabinet. And you don't want it to do that and catch the wrong thing. And we got a little bit of yellow poking through. That's probably an alignment registration issue there. Oh, and I just pulled more. Nope, that was an existing issue. Okay. See how that goes. I gotta try to minimize these parts where it's peeling the blue paint off. You see what I'm doing over here? Yeah. All right, let me start picking through this off. I'll get all this off, and we'll take a look at what we got then. Quick little progress update. It's starting to emerge, and it's looking okay, but it's a ton of work picking out all of these, pieces of the, of the template of the stencil that get left behind when you peel the main part off. So I'll just continue to do my little meticulous work here, peeling all these little pieces off. But I'm liking what I'm seeing. I've got a little optimism coming back. This was the only sort of new issue so far that'll be easy to restore, repair. But yeah, cautiously optimistic at this stage. Several hours later, and here's what we've got. So I don't think it looks too bad on this side. You know, we've got these patches where the blue peeled off that we're going to have to touch up, but that's not so bad. They're all kind of, you know, in the blue, not affecting anything else. Coming down here, obviously we're going to cover up the blue, or the yellow that should have been masked off. Probably got some yellow to touch up a little bit where I had to sand it down from runs and bugs and whatever. Down here, however, you know, we got quite a bit of yellow that has to be touched up, and even some pink and some black right there to connect that, but I think that's all pretty doable. Down here, you know, nice big patch in the lower area, inside the ghost or the monster that has to be repaired. Some yellow down there. Really didn't go into the pink, but some of the yellow peeled up. And yeah, I still need to clean it up a little bit. You know, there's loose pieces or whatever, but I think most of the damage is done. Pretty happy with how the stencil came out. You know, a little bit of registration issues where, you know, not exactly perfect, like the, you know, yellow poking out there, but, you know, really not so bad. The front, I think, really came out nice. I would say this is like 98% perfect. You know, a little scuff up here, a little pink run right there. Yeah, I got to touch up the blue at the bottom, again, where I didn't mask off originally. But in terms of the stencils at the you know, the front plate, the kick plate, the front of the cabinet, I am very, very happy with how that came out. You know, a little bit of yellow poking through another side that we'll cover up. But all in all, very, very happy with the front. However, this side is the worst side. So again, not too bad up here. You know, this will be, you know, a lot of steady hand work. But even that's not so bad. Coming down here, some of the yellow pulled up, and I think it's because it's really the blue that peeled up. And obviously anything on top of it's not going to stay on. And then coming down here, you know, pretty much more of the same that we saw on the other side. But over here, the back half of the ghost, I'm basically going to have to freehand. Yeah, and it's late. I'm tired. I'm gonna go to bed. You know, I got work in the morning or whatever, and if I don't get a good night's sleep, I'm gonna hear about it from Ty. Ty always gives me grief when I'm up too late and working on this stuff or whatever, but I love it so much. Even super, super frustrating work like this. Let me turn that away and focus my attention on the front. Yeah, that looks good. All right. So yeah, I'm gonna call it a night. This video's not over. I'm gonna call it a night in the morning, maybe before work, I don't know. Depends on how early I get up. I'm gonna probably take some sandpaper to the exposed primer and kind of rough it up a little bit, scuff it up a little bit, you know, try to give me some better adhesion. And then I've got a bunch of, I don't even know where they are. I got a bunch of brushes here. I got a whole bunch of foam brushes that I can probably use. Plus, I bought some of these cheap, I don't know, they call them stencil brushes. I don't know why. I don't think they're intended for this type of work, but, you know, little smaller brushes, including some pretty fine ones to give me some, you know, detail control. So, yeah, I'll get some sleep, sand down the exposed areas, and then we'll get to work. I'll probably do the blue, let that dry, maybe do the yellow, or do the pink, and then the yellow and the black will have to come later, just sort of how things worked out. But yeah, lots of touch-up work to go, but we're getting there. All right, another quick update. I've started the touch-up process. I think it's going pretty well. I've started with the blue paint. I've got some poured into a little cup here, and I'm using some foam brushes. I think I've kind of completed everything I can do with the largest size foam brush that I have. I think it's going okay. You know, the bottom's all filled in. All of the places that don't require a ton of detail, really a steady hand, you know, I can do it with, you know, broad brush strokes, if you will. So that's looking all pretty good. You know, I've got little pieces I need to fill in. And of course, you know, lots of detail here, and then yellow and pink and some black. Maybe some places are a little thinner than they should be. You know, the front's looking pretty good. I covered up all of the sort of trim on the bottom that needed to be, you know, covered up. Coming around, oh, to this side. basically same idea. This is going to be the most work here, where I'm basically reconstructing the back half of that monster. But I think this is going pretty good. So I'm going to switch to the smaller foam brushes, and then eventually the tiny little art brushes, and then I'll do the yellow and the pink. But keep your fingers crossed. I know I've said that a couple of times, but I think we're heading in the right direction. Ta-da! I'm done. I'm totally done. I am done with all of the touch-ups, all of the painting. Oh man, I could go all night, but I'd just be driving myself crazy. Here's all the touch-up paints I was using. I did the blue in a couple different stages. The yellow I did earlier today, so that's all closed up. But I sprayed the pink into a cup, and that's the black came from this can. But I'm done. And you know what? These brushes right here were straight garbage. These bristles are way too stiff. So I went back to Ace Hardware and I got some of these right here. I think these are actual artist brushes, but yeah. So we're done. There's probably more I could do. Like I said, I could go spend hours and hours and stay up all night and just drive myself crazy. But I think we're good enough. It's passing. I'm about 4 feet away from the cabinet, and I think it passes the 4-foot test. There are some things that I could touch up a little bit more, but it's all there. It all looks pretty good. We can zoom in super close, and yeah, there's some imperfections here and there, and there's some texture. I don't love it. Look at that. You get real close, and Miss Pac doesn't look as pretty. Down here too, you can see where there's like texture, almost like a crater, where the blue paint lifted off and it had to be painted in. And you can see the sheen is a little bit different where it's been painted with a brush instead of sprayed. Lots of texture back here where it got real bad. But I mean, everything is where it's supposed to be. The front looks really good, I would say. I barely did any touch-ups on the front. The front is easily an A. I would say the sides are generously a B, and maybe I'm just being overcritical. And I went in, there was a little bit of touch-ups in the hood here. You can see where it's still drying. This is all still very much wet paint. Coming back over here, this was the worst side. And again, now I'm about 6 feet away, and especially at the bottom, it'll pass the 6 feet test, right? But if we come in real close, we can see, this ghost, 100% painted with stencil. This ghost, 100% painted with stencil with some touch-ups. This ghost, you can see the hand there. The back arm, a little bit different, right? As I basically freehanded it. There were some remnants that I was able to follow, and I think I did okay, but it's obviously not perfect. And you go in real close, a lot of rough texture there. Because I had, and I see something that I missed. I missed the sort of bottom lip, so I'll have to add that real quick after I finish recording this. But yeah, we are done with the Ms. Pac, or at least the stencils. I still have to put it all back together. There's still some issues with the coin door I have to resolve, but the PCB is working, the monitor's working, although I might actually use a different monitor than I was originally planning on using. But the cabinet itself is done. That restoration is complete. So we'll be done pretty soon restoring the Ms. Pac. So that's exciting. I appreciate it if you've been following me on this journey the whole way. This was sort of the first pickup video that I did more than 2 years ago. This was the first project that I started from scratch more than 2 years ago. So if you've been following me on this journey the whole way, I appreciate it. And if you want to get caught up, there is a playlist that this video is a part of, and you can go check out the Ms. Pac playlist and see how far we've gone from the completely painted black cabinet, stripped all the way down and sanded to bare wood, and now we've redone the stencils. And for the most part, I'm happy with it. And most likely, I just touched some wet black paint. Most likely, this side will be up against a wall. Obviously, the kick plate will be visible. This side might be partially, visible. It's going to be mostly, in a row, most likely. But I'm happy with it, and I'm not going to drive myself crazy. I'm not going to let my OCD or my touch of perfectionism take over. I'm satisfied with this. Certainly I don't want to work anymore. And there's a lot that we learned from this, right? This was my first ever attempt at redoing the stencils on a cabinet, and I learned a ton. Number one, don't sand the primer with too fine a grit. You need it to be kind of rough, right? Like 80 grit is probably good, maybe even 60 or 40, right? It needs to be rough enough for the paint to grab onto. Otherwise, you're going to have adhesion issues like we did with the blue. The other thing I learned, I don't necessarily love HVLP. You know, maybe for the base coat, but you know, you don't have a ton of control. It takes a lot of time to set up and clean and put away. I really, you know, the layers that were the best for me were the pink and the black, which were rattle cans, right? So I think in the future, if I'm going to do this again in the future, and I'm not exactly looking forward to re-stenciling a cabinet, I say knowing full well that there are multiple projects back here. I see you Williams cabinets that are going to need to be re-stenciled. What I might attempt doing the next time is rolling on the base layer. So using a roller to put on the primer and the base coat, you know, whatever the background color is, and then just using rattle cans if I can find good matching colors for the stencil layers. But I hope this video was helpful for you. I know a lot of people have been looking forward to this. You know, I guess there are only a few videos out there, you know, showing people how to re-stencil arcade cabinets. And if this is helpful at all to you, well, I'm glad I could help, right? Let me know down below what you think. Have you done this differently? You know, do you have any advice, any recommendations, things I should try next time? But, you know, one thing I am planning on doing, if I can find it here real quick, I think I am going to do a clear coat. I bought a bunch of this, Rust-Oleum Painter's Touch 2x Ultra Cover Satin Clear. I'm thinking about putting this on. I'm going to let this, all the touch-ups really, really dry well for like at least a week or two before putting on the clear coat. Let me know what you think. Is this a good idea, or should I just leave the paint to cure? Should I put a clear coat on? Let me know. People that have done this before, I need your advice. If this is your first time in the channel, welcome. This is basically what we do. I got tons of projects here. I got games in the basement. I got games out on location. And we, you know, the channel's all about restoring and repairing these classic arcade machines. You know, this is a real passion for me. I love this hobby. I love sharing it with other people. And that's what we do here. Hit that subscribe button if you've never done it before. You don't want to miss any of these episodes. I release new ones, you know, basically every weekend, Sundays. Sometimes they're late, sometimes they're on Mondays. And hitting that subscribe button, ringing that bell, you'll get notified whenever I release a new video. A great way to support the channel, if you want to support the channel, become a channel member. We have this awesome group of channel members that are super, super generous in supporting the channel. Basically, they all donate $1.99 a month, and in exchange, they get access to some awesome perks. We do a monthly exclusive members-only live stream. They get early access to all new videos, typically 24 hours in advance, sometimes well in advance. And we have a private members-only Discord, which is a really great community. All the feedback on that Discord has been so awesome. People love it. And if you don't believe me, take it from all of these awesome channel members. So if you're interested in learning more about what it means to become an Overtime Arcade channel member, hit that join button down below. It'll show you what it's all about. We've also got a merchandise shop. I think there's free shipping on everything you buy from the official Overtime Arcade merchandise shop until November 3rd. So better hurry if you want to take advantage of that. You know, stock up for the holidays. You know, Christmas season will be here around the corner. Holiday season, buy some gifts for yourself or others. And yeah, I think that'll do it. So as always, I've been Charlie. Thanks for watching Overtime Arcade, and we'll see you next time.
Overtime!